Okay. 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 We had, I guess Liz thought we were missing two this morning. That wasn't just one, so things got kind of screwed up. All right. Are we ready to go to work? Okay, here we go. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, November 30th, 2023, 7:33 a.m. And this is the meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for the City of Edina. And before we call the meeting to order, just a reminder, again, as Director Benarat provided information before, at least I think she did, maybe not. No, okay, I'm doing it. I'm doing the solo act on this one. We do these meetings on a hybrid basis, and if you want to call in, there's going to be a call-in number that pops up on the screen, and it's important for you to take a look at that right now and write it down. And the conference PIN number, because we're going to come up on the only time you can participate in the meeting this morning, and that's on community comment. So that's going to come up right at the beginning of the agenda. So write that number down, and you may be watching in a variety of different ways on your computer. So let's now call the meeting to order, and we'll ask Liz Olson, our administrative support specialist, to call the roll. Ms. Olson, please.
Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance is next.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we have a meeting agenda. Is there anyone that wishes to modify the agenda in any form or fashion? Staff or HRA members? All right. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved. Oh,
okay.
Second.
Commissioner Risser moves, Commissioner Jackson seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we are at community comment. And folks, if you're in the broader viewing audience, please take a look at that phone number again, because we're going to get there in a moment. We're going to go to anybody in our audience that wishes to address the HRA first. And I don't think there's anybody with us live this morning that wants to address the HRA. And we'll now turn to Director Benarat and see if there's anybody online that wishes to address us.
I do have callers on the line, but no one has signaled a desire to speak. As a reminder, if you'd like to speak, press *1 on your telephone keypad. That's the asterisk symbol, then the number 1. That will put you in the queue to speak. Still don't see anyone in the queue. I would recommend we wait just a minute. There we go. I have a caller. Operator, will you please unmute the line of our first caller? And caller, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
And caller, just as a reminder before you speak, if it's something that's on the agenda today or scheduled for a future public hearing, it wouldn't be a topic you can address. But other than that, please, we're ready to hear your comment. Thank you.
Lori Groats, 5513 Park Place. Can you hear me?
We can, Ms. Groats. Go ahead.
Okay. I have 3 quick questions, please. First one, why hasn't the city required the property owner at 7200, 7250 to remove or cover up the graffiti on his property? I don't know if it's gang related or not, but that needs to go. It doesn't belong there on our most traveled thoroughfare in the city. The next 2 questions are on the Pentagon TIF district. The first one is regarding the road that goes from 77th Street to the Fred Richards Park, and it's about the easement there for that public access road. So does the easement for this public access road to Fred Richards, allow Edina to use that road solely as a public access road? If so, the city needs to honor that and not allow the developer to use it in any way that impedes public access. The Seven Hills Academy project would severely compromise public access. Okay, the last question is also about the Pentagon Park TIF, and that's about the parking ramp that's over there, the one that we've been watching, I don't know for how many years. I think the TIF district started in 2014, and that ramp's been completed for many years, but never opened to the public. So, has there been an amendment to that TIF district to allow the Eddy apartment dwellers to park in the public ramp? Now, I've been watching that over the years, and it's never been open for the public. Now, during the pandemic, the property owner was leasing the ramp. It appeared to an auto dealer who was storing all of his vehicles in there, but it wasn't open to the public. Now, last week I was over there, and son of a gun, if the north entrance wasn't open, it was open. The south side wasn't, but the north entrance was open. So I went in there, and the first level is open. The access to the upper levels, that's all blocked off. But there were 11 cars inside the ramp, and I asked some people getting out of their car, I asked them whether or not they lived at the Eddy and whether or not they could park in that ramp. And I was told, yes, if you're a resident at the Eddy, your first vehicle for parking underground is $100 a month. But if you want to park a vehicle in the parking ramp, it's $20 a month. So there were 11 cars in the lot. My question is, who's getting the money? The owner of the Eddy, Hillcrest Development, the owner of the ramp, or is the city getting any of that money? I don't remember there being any amendment to that TIF district to allow that. That ramp was built with TIF monies for a public purpose, not for the financial benefit of the property owner. Also, I don't know if you can answer this or not. Also, when he was storing or leasing property for automobile storage, how much money did he take in and how much did the city get of that? I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gross.
Bye.
Thank you.
I have no other callers at this time.
All right, very good. Well, I think we'll be addressing the graffiti issue, 7200, 7250 France, in part this morning. So, but the other questions may require a little bit of research. So we'll use our usual practice and wait until our subsequent meeting of the HRA to address these issues raised by Ms. Groats. All right. Now it is our practice to have our city manager, who sits in this capacity as our executive director of the HRA, to respond to community comments from the prior meeting, and I recall there were some that we wanted to respond to. I think in terms of one of the key ones was, do we use data in the work that we do?
Yes, Mr. Chair, right? Yeah. And members of the commission, we had two speakers at our last HRA meeting. First dealt with National League of Cities. Why do we send people? Do we use data in our decision making? And of course we do. National data has limited impact on our decision making. So a lot of the data that we use for decision making comes from professional sources. You see that a lot in engineering, you see it a lot in legal, but also from the League of Minnesota Cities as well, because their data sets are much more closer aligned to our operations as a Minnesota city. So yes, we do. Also, the second question was around the Americans with Disabilities Act and its application to the Grandview District. We did invite a member from the Minnesota Council on Disabilities, came in and saw the site, gave us some suggestions on how we could sign it better. So we will be putting those And in fact, I think those signs are up. I think they were supposed to go up this week. So that's what we're doing with that, and those were the two questions.
All right. Does that prompt anything from HRA members that they want to comment on? With regard to the data thing, I was thinking about it a little bit too, and all the years I've been involved in local government, council members and staff, I think council members in particular, because we're the policymakers, I've seen the facts drive the decisions. And the facts, we use an inductive reasoning process. We don't make up our mind what we want to do and look for facts to support them. We let the facts drive the decisions, and that's just my sort of general observation of the inductive reasoning of councils term after term, in my opinion. That's the process that individual members use. It's the process our staff uses, I think, in advising the council. Member, Commissioner Risser.
I do have one concern about our last council meeting where we were talking about organized trash hauling, and before we made our decision, we did not get any information directly from the commissioners who worked many, many years on that. So I do appreciate how data is an integral part of our process, but if it's not presented, if we don't hear it, and since that meeting, I have learned there was a lot of concern on the part of commissioners regarding that final report that appeared in our packet, and many felt it didn't reflect their views. So I do want to get that out there. You know, we can have all the data, but if it doesn't make it to us, that's a very big problem.
All right, thanks for that comment. I think you should raise that again when we have our next council meeting. From time to time in the past, it seems to me like when we've had issues that are a little bit more controversial than others, we've had presentations from commissions, and we could certainly do that in these circumstances where we are taking on an issue that has broad implications for the public. However, I don't know. I mean, I feel like our staff over the years has reflected accurately the positions of commissions, and those underlying, I think those underlying reports were there available too. It seems to me that the report was about 75 pages long that we had, not just the executive summary, but I think it's a conversation worth having about issues that tend to be more broadly controversial in the community. If we have a commission that has a report that they want to report out on, to let them make their report as well as the staff report. So. All right, and then let's move on. Nobody else has come online. Director Benarott? All right. We've got a consent agenda. There isn't much on there. One item. So is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adopt the item on the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting a single item on the consent agenda as part of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we're on to the heart of the meeting, which is reports and recommendations. And the first matter in front of us is a potential amendment to the 7001 France Avenue redevelopment agreement with MDI France Avenue LLC. And our Economic Development Manager, Bill Neuendorf, has this matter and will make that presentation. And I say, actually, this is the sole reason for our gathering this morning is to discuss this extension. So let's turn now to Manager Neuendorf for his setting of the stage for this conversation.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. The item is in regards to two redevelopment agreements that were executed back in 2022. And these relate to the proposed development at 70th and France. 7001 and 7025 France are the property addresses. The developers are here with us this morning as well to answer any questions after I'm finished with my report. But as you might recall, this project has been in the works for several years. We were aiming to break ground this summer. And with all the changes and the uncertainty and the movement in the capital markets, financing just was not available this summer. So the project is seeing a delay. However, behind the scenes, there's been a lot of work that's been happening, and that has happened in accordance with what we did expect. But we wanted to bring forward an amendment this morning to the tax increment financing agreement to change the dates in the schedule to reflect the current economic situations. That's really the only substantial change in the amendment. So while the construction has not started yet, there is a lot that has happened. The developer has acquired the property. As we all know, the U.S. Bank branch did get rebuilt and relocated to the edge of the property. So the developer bought the remainder after that happened, tore down the first building, tore down the second building, cleaned up the site, and has been working relentlessly to secure financing, although the winds are in their face, not behind them this year. The site is located as shown in this aerial photo. It's about a 6-acre property. This is the approved site plan, and this dates back to 2021 and 2022, but the single site would be split, in fact has been split into 4 parcels. The bank is on the far southwestern corner and is not part of the TIF agreement. The TIF agreement only binds sites A, B, and C. A would be the future apartment. Site B is the office retail building, and Site C is the shared parking. This is one of the renderings of the project, just to refresh our memories. It's a big project, big in scale, big in investment, and big in risk. The overall project cost exceeds $250 million for the apartment and the office and the parking to make it work. That is all privately financed, so that's all in the developer's court right now. For projects like this, whenever the HRA gets involved with financing, we work to ensure that the risk rests with the developer, not with the city or the HRA. So at this point in time, we have pledged up to $22 million in TIF notes after they successfully complete the project. To date, the city has put $0 into the property. So again, the entire risk is with the developer at this point. We've all heard and seen and felt the changes in the interest rate structure this year. It can be good if you're an investor looking for a CD. You can actually get a real interest on a CD these days. But if you're a builder, a developer, or a business, boy, those rates are tough. And while interest rates always fluctuate, it was not anticipated, not expected, or predicted that the Fed would raise the rates consistently this many times in a row. And it's that unpredictability that's really brought some turmoil to the capital markets, where a lot of lenders, most lenders, are just not willing to invest and support a project of this scale at this particular moment. That will change, but we need some time to see that happen. So we worked with Dorsey and Whitney to prepare this amendment. They are the HRA's legal team that prepared the initial agreements. And in the packet, of course, the amendments are there. One amendment is for Site A, which is the apartment. The other amendment is for Site B and C, the office. And essentially, we're pushing back the start date about 1.5 years to 2025. We're pushing back the completion date from 2025, about 2 years, to the middle of 2027. No other changes are anticipated now. Although, just to be transparent, there's a lot of changes in the financial markets, and so as this project does come together and the capital markets free up, there might be some need for future discussion of other amendments. But at this point, what we're asking for and what I'm recommending is that we simply extend the dates for the developer to get their work done. And if there's any other amendments to the deal, that would be a future conversation at a future date. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions. As I mentioned, the developer, Ted Carlson with Orion, is here this morning. Dan Lesser and Nate Podratz with Mortensen are here with us this morning as well. And with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks. I think, all of us have received a few emails from concerned citizens, some in the neighborhood, some beyond the neighborhood, about the graffiti. Lori Groats, one of our residents, just raised the issue. You and the developer were ahead of that issue, and we've been talking to them about that, and you had some proposed language, I think, that you discussed including in the amendment that would deal with some of these cleanup issues, final cleanup issues.
Yeah, we did anticipate that additional diligence would be required on the site anytime there's a delay. So in the amendment, section 2.2 does include a catch-all statement that requires the developer to keep the site, including any fencing around the site, in good condition, good, reasonable, and usable condition, free of litter, dumping, etc. That would apply to both, or to all the sites, A, B, and C, from the date of this amendment today to the future, when they actually build the building. So that we did want to include that just to keep it in good condition. To the best of my knowledge, this property does not have graffiti on it. I think that's a different property across the street, a block or two down.
Yeah, it is. 7250, I think, is what people have been concerned about.
Right. So
no, this site is clean.
This site is clean. I did confer with the developers last night. In the heavy winds last week, one tree was blown down. A dead tree on the site was blown down. They're in the process of having that removed. Their property managers and asset managers are aware of that, and we'll make sure that that happens. But to the best of my knowledge, there's no other distress on the property, on this property at this time. But we wanted to include this language in the contract just because things happen. So the city, the HRA, does have rights to push on the developer if needed to clean things up on the site.
Okay. Yeah, I should have been a little bit clearer that it was done at 7250. I think that we've got some of those issues. Are we expecting any kind of extension on those two projects on that side of the street?
On 7250, to the best of my recollection, those dates are pushed out already a little bit. There's a little bit longer runway for that project, so I think we're good there. But we'll double check as we get towards the end of the year. Those are usually when we have critical dates, so let me double check on that other project.
Yeah. Well, the 7001 site looks real nice and clean. As you drive in the new U.S. Bank site and look across, it looks very good. But I think this seemed like an opportunity to do something about 7250 also, as long as we had the person here. And of course, that's what our residents have been talking about, is 7250.
And in regards to the 7250, I know there was some graffiti this summer. The developer and I did talk about that. I know at one point they did clean it up. They covered it up to at least not deliver whatever message was trying to be delivered there. One of the challenges with graffiti is you cover it up one day, they'll come back 3 days later and do it again. So I don't know the current status, but I think it was back in August, July or August, the developer and I arranged to have him cover that up, and it did happen. But there may have been more graffiti since that time. I'm just not aware of the details today.
I think the question is, like the wall the graffiti is on, does that need to be there? Does that still have a structural purpose? And if so, we should think about how to not make that artist backdrop for whatever purpose. And notice graffiti is happening around town too, on the frontage road over by my house. There was graffiti painted on the concrete wall over there, and some of our staff from Public Works, John Shearer, told me that it's been happening all over town, some of this graffiti work, and so it would be nice to catch the persons involved or person. But nonetheless, maybe we can address that today with the developer at 7250. Maybe it's not actually part of this, I know that, but I think it's an opportunity to talk about what we can do at 7250 to keep it looking as good as it can look.
Sure. The developer's happy to respond if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carlson, for being here this morning.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Good morning, HRA members. Ted Carlson with Orion Investments. In regard to the graffiti, it's been an ongoing battle. We are due to clean it up again. We've been in constant communication with Mr. Neuendorf and staff about the best way to do that, so rest assured we're aware of it and we will take care of it.
Okay. Hey, your microphone wasn't working very well. Yeah, lean in and tell us again that you're going to.
I'm sorry, Ted Carlson with Orion Investments. We own the 7200 and 7250 site, and we've been aware of the graffiti. We've been on top of it, and we're due to clean it up again, and we've been engaged with Mr. Neundorf and staff to try to stay ahead of it. It's an ongoing problem, but we will continue to fight it and take care of it.
Okay. And that wall it's on is
It's structural.
is important to the integrity of the site?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It would not be removed until redevelopment occurs.
Sure. Yeah, if it wasn't, it would look like 7001.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you. So the first one's for Mr. Neuendorf. The 15-year term, when does that start? Does that start on the 9/26 date or on the completion date?
Yeah, good question. So the 7001 France TIF district is a 15-year district, and it starts the date that we create the TIF district, and it's certified by the county. So that happened in 2022. So the clock's running. So when it comes to payments to the developer, at this point, initially we expected about, actually let me I was incorrect in what I just said. One clock started running in 2022, but the actual 15-year term for payment starts in I think 4 years, so I think 2026. That is a firm date. So how we typically structure tax increment agreements is to make sure that the developer has the full available term. With this delay, we cannot extend that.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason why the developers have been working so hard to get this thing financed and start construction. But that right now, unless there's a change in state law or something massive like that, that clock is running. Hasn't started yet, but it's still running.
Okay, excellent. And then the other part of the question that one of the residents raised was the assessment. So the assessment was set when we made this agreement. The buildings were still standing, and that has not changed, correct?
Correct. When we define the initial base value of the property, that happens when we certify the district, which was July of 2022. So that number is set. The county does adjust, everyone's taxes every year, so it does fluctuate a little bit. But if the question is whether we can reassess it and start the clock over now that it's vacant, we are unable to do that.
The concern was that the value went down when the buildings were demolished. And so they're like, oh, well, now it's worth even less, and the taxes that are coming off the property currently are less than they would have been if we hadn't demolished the buildings. And that's not correct, is what I'm hearing you say.
I would have to double check to see whether or not the taxes have even been adjusted yet. Those buildings were pretty old, pretty obsolete, so the assessment may have been mostly land value.
Okay.
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
Sure.
But we could certainly follow up.
But we haven't lost value by taking the building. The taxes received from that property have not gone down because the buildings have been demolished. Is that correct?
I don't know that.
All right.
I'd have to talk to the assessor to confirm.
Okay.
Mr. Carlson may know that.
Yeah.
You got the estimated.
I don't know the exact answer to the question. I do know that the real estate tax carry is significant and has been unchanged.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that answers the concern. The concern was, well, gosh, this delay means we're going to get, with the buildings gone, the value's gone down. But we're assured that you're still paying taxes on the property, and they are significant.
Yes.
Okay. So while you're up, I have some questions for you about this project. So I know that this is financially driven. So I'm going to start with a financial question, and that is, are your estimates flexible enough that currently we have a high interest rate, but I seriously doubt it's going to go down to close to zero like it had been prior to the pandemic in response to the financial crisis. Are your estimates flexible enough that if interest rates don't continue to rise, but they don't drop dramatically, you'll still be able to bring this project forward?
Yes, great question. I think, Commissioner Jackson, as much as interest rates have hurt us, which no doubt they have, and if you look at our project in June of 22 versus today, our interest carry is almost double what it was before. So that's a significant financial drag. But a couple things have remained the same. Number one, demand for our project is still strong, both from commercial tenants and potential residents. So that's a positive. Number two, rents have not quite caught up to where they should need to be to make the project happen, to carry those additional interest rates. So as time starts to heal this financial crisis, what will have happen is lenders, banks come back into the market. What Dan and Nate and I were faced with was literally we were unable to obtain a lender that would participate in the project. Liquidity was simply gone. It evaporated from the market. And so while we wouldn't have been able to build a project with interest rates where they're at today, we didn't even have a chance to do so because liquidity was gone, lenders exited the market. So we remain poised and prepared for when liquidity comes back and rates are a little more reasonable to make this project happen.
Okay,
Does
terrific.
that address the question?
It does, yeah. You answered it in my follow-up question as well, so thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, that's great, that's great. Thank you, that's all.
Member Risser had her hand up.
This is a question probably for Manager Neuendorf as well as our attorney, David Kendall, but one of the key criteria for granting approval of a force majeure, my understanding is, meeting that unforeseeable circumstance element. And I'm looking at a chart, 30 years, historical mortgage rates, they rise, they fall. I mean, that's very predictable. We know it. When we purchased our first home, we were so excited. It came with a 7.25% assumable mortgage rate. We were so happy. It was weird. But now, looking at this, I don't see how it could be interpreted that this particular factor is unforeseeable. So if the developer could comment on that, and I guess I'd like to hear from all three of you.
I'll let the developer start with that.
Sure. Commissioner Risser, thank you for the question. I think everyone on the development side of the table anticipated that rates would rise. I think it's an unprecedented since 1980-ish, the rapid rise and the rate at which that rise happened. So we were carrying, some reasonable interest rate assumptions and increases in interest rate within our pro formas. But what we didn't model is that there would be zero liquidity, zero opportunities to secure debt and or equity. So while it is a function of interest rates that have a significant drag on the project, when literally there are no capital partners due to that rise in interest rate, we don't have a dance partner.
Thank you.
So then would you segue to why liquidity, in your view, is a problem?
Well, I think liquidity on projects like this that are, large, complex, but visionary and change the landscape of our city for the better and bring the Southdale Design Experience Guidelines to life. When we're looking at an office retail project that's plus or minus $125 million and a multifamily project that's plus or minus $150 million, that requires institutional debt and equity. These are not, locally financed projects. This is sophisticated, large funds, pension funds, investment funds that participate in these projects. And when the dial was turned and interest rates rose, that created a major impact on the value of real estate across the board. And so these large institutional partners all of a sudden got very defensive and put up walls, so to speak, and said, we love your project, we like the development team, we love the location and the design and everything else, and said, but we're just out of the game. We need to focus on the assets that we have now, stabilize, refinance, do other things. So it was simply a situation where we were unable to find it. It didn't exist, not only here, but anywhere in the country. And so as you look at development pipelines, new construction starts, new projects, they're down anywhere from 50 to 75%. So I don't know if I'm appropriately addressing that question, but it's just a case where there's no liquidity not only for us, but almost anyone in this market.
I think Commissioner Pierce has some questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a number of questions I have are around consequences of, agreeing to do this or not. And so if I want to dive into those, and I think I'll start with where Commissioner Jackson asked a question about TIF. And so the way this is teed up, construction, we're pushing out 2 years. Completion, we're pushing out 3 years, actually, now that I look at that. No, it's supposed to start 2025. We're pushing it out to 2027. So 2 years based on that. If the TIF district, the clock is supposed to start 2026. And so my question there is, if we agree to do this, and for whatever reason, liquidity is still not there, we can't get financing, what happens to the project, and then what happens with the TIF agreement?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that one. So the way we've structured the tax financing deals to date assumes that the developer would be able to earn payments or reimbursements for that full 15-year term. And that was essential to get to this point. We thought, a year ago, we thought we'd be underground or in the ground under construction. If there is further delays, it might turn out where the developer only gets 14 years reimbursement, 13 years reimbursement, 12 years reimbursement. So that's the risk that the developer takes. The city intentionally structures it that way. We don't want to overcommit the city. We're also limited, of course, by state law, but that's the risk of the developer. But at some point in time, they'll have to do their own internal calculus. When does it make sense to only get 14 years payments rather than 15? Mm-hmm. Or if it's, worst case, they're getting 5-year payments rather than 15, they've got to rethink internally, does this deal even make sense? The investors will also have the same conversation, both the equity and the debt. But that's something the city, the HRA, really is not privy to. That would be a go or no-go decision that the developer makes.
So the clock actually starts, but we're not making payments until the project is completed.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, correct. Yep. The way Edina structures our deal, after they perform, after the developer delivers and finances it and pays for it, then we will begin partial reimbursements.
Okay. And then this is I guess a broader question. When we talked about this graffiti, so my question there is, if we pull that up a little, if we pull out of the mire of there's graffiti on the wall, my question there is another consequences. So we've approved a number of projects. We've approved this one. We're experiencing delays for whatever reason. From a community standpoint, it feels like if we're delaying construction, a consequence to the community is those sites just sit there, and we end up with another public works situation that's been there for more than a decade. And so what can we do? It's more to me than just about the graffiti. Now, the U.S. Bank site, building is gone. That could very easily look like a park, but not 2250 the way it is, not 2250, 7250, the way it is today. And so they become eyesores the more and more we delay. And I think that's what causes the issue, because the sites are vacant. Nothing's happening there. If they're redeveloped, then we get benefit from that. And so from a community standpoint, as these projects get delayed, specifically, we can stick to this one, but the question is the same. How do we address the consequences for the community of an eyesore being there? And so that could be a question for the developer.
Why don't you start with that one? Yeah.
Morning, Commissioner Pierce. Thank you for the question. I think as it relates to the public works site versus the sites that we control and own on France Avenue, is we are faced with significant carry costs in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so as Bill referenced earlier, the risk and the responsibility lies with us to perform. And the financial motivation for us to perform is extreme and significant. When it comes to graffiti, we've been all over it. I would also say that in the case of 7200 and 7250, I believe that after they're demolished, the site looks a heck of a lot better. It certainly doesn't look great by any stretch of the means, but it was an improvement to get those, dilapidated, ugly buildings out of there. So the improvements, we were dangerously close to starting there, faced with the same challenges we're talking about today. And we'll continue to do the best that we can to get these projects out of the ground. And our motivation level is as high as it's ever been due to the financial impacts of holding high-quality land in a high-quality city.
Okay.
Having delays is one of the risks of redevelopment. It's happened on other projects, right? The city's public works site has been dormant for 10 years. We use it for staging for construction for city projects and others, but it doesn't look great. The Pentagon Village site, that Pentagon South, was vacant for 6 years before they could get the first deal. Unfortunately, that's just one of the risks of living in a community where you're in that redevelopment phase. Sometimes they go quickly, but it seems to me there's a correlation between the ambitiousness of the project and the time it takes to actually get it delivered. So no one wants to be in this situation. But to transform, for example, the 7001 France site into a park for a year, you're looking at probably a couple $1 million to make that happen. And I don't think that's in the developer's pro forma. I don't know if the city would want to kick in for something like that. But unfortunately, I think it's just one of those delays that we'll do our best, both the city and the developer, to keep it looking in decent shape. But it's going to be an active construction site for a couple years.
So to be clear, I was not suggesting that we spend $1 million and make these parks. My point was 7250 is a bunch of concrete. The U.S. Bank site, there's soil there. And so once the buildings were gone, there will be probably grass and weeds growing there at some point. And so it wasn't my suggestion that we make it a park. But I think that it is incumbent on us as a city. I think consequences, and we're kind of talking around this a little bit, I think some of the consequences of us having sites that are not active construction zones for extended periods of time are safety. And so we've had several emails where, gates are supposed to be open or closed, gates are down, signs are not where they're necessarily supposed to be. And so I think we have safety issues. And so I think as a city, if we are, and I'll say reasonably so, right? I think it's reasonable to expect that projects, there are going to be delays, to your point. I think we have to figure out what we can do to these sites if it's going to be extended to make them, more aesthetic, more safe, while we're waiting for these projects to continue. So that was my point there. And then the last one, we have had, and this is, I think, we have had emails, and I'm going to infer that the comments are, they're members of our electorate that are thinking, if we deny today, then that means something else can be built on that site. And so there's a couple of emails that I'm reading into that would suggest they don't believe at the building that we've approved. at the U.S. Bank site is what is needed by the community. So by not voting for this extension means something else gets done. And so if you can just clarify where we are today and what a yes or no vote actually means from a consequences standpoint for the city. And then, Mr. Carlson, if you could do that for the developer, that'd be great.
Sure. And I can speak in more generalities. Mr. Carlson has the specifics. He'll be the one that feels the impact.
But you can be specific about the city agreement.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So for the for this site, the city has approved and entitled the project that we're talking about. The city cannot unapprove that construction project. Right now, the developer and their investors own the site. It's not for sale at the moment. So if the HRA or the city were to deny this amendment, theoretically, by the end of the year, the project would be in default of their TIF agreement. We could then file a notice of default. They have about a year opportunity to try to fix the default. If they fail to fix it, the city agreement would be null and void. My concern, and then theoretically, something else will happen. It will probably, looking at the Pentagon Park and what happened with that, it doesn't happen overnight, so you're facing more delays. My concern, though, is if the city puts a project into default, the investors don't want to be part of a defaulted project. No lender will look at the project. You've essentially killed the project, which puts the whole thing into a nosedive. So the overall impact to the community is further delay, further distress. I don't want to guess how the developer would respond to that, but declaring a default is something I would not recommend at this time. I think it's still a viable project, just not in 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Neuendorf. I think to piggyback on those comments, is Bill's exactly right, is our team continues to pursue project partners. If we don't have an extension on these dates, it's very hard to continue on that path. And I rest assured that we have looked under every rock and around every corner to find dance partners. We expect that market will loosen up sometime in 2024. And I would also remind the Commission that our team started on this project in June of 2020 in the depths of the pandemic. And through a 2-year process with heavy engagement with Commission and Council and HRA and neighborhoods and the county, watershed, potential tenants, we designed a project that, while nothing's perfect, we think is very good and fulfills the vision of the Southdale guidelines. I think it even goes above and beyond. So I think for us as a team here to bring those guidelines and that vision to life, we need more time.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Commissioner Risser?
I do appreciate Director Neuendorf's comment at the very beginning that this is a big project that does carry big cost and big risk. And as I look at what's happening today, I feel as if the TIF agreement, or the agreement that was approved with these timelines, is something that protects the city and the residents. And as we look at the project, office buildings is, an office is one of them. We have so many, and all over the place. We don't really need that. More high-end apartments. We've been building high-end apartments. We've been building, luxury places so much in Edina. I feel like we don't need another one. And then the parking ramp, which a lot of people are very concerned the public is not going to benefit from because they can only use it, my understanding is, on the weekends. So I think those are all things that we need to consider as we weigh this possibility. The other thing is, building on what Commissioner Pierce said, this delays the movement of what could happen on this land. And I do think, just because of the scale and the intensity of it, it will remain a very challenging project. So, if we want to get development moving, maybe this is a sign, our process could be working the way it should exactly function. The other thing is, I went out to the site to walk on the sidewalk just 2 days ago, and as I was walking northward from the bank, and going across that driveway that goes onto the property, I told myself, okay, stop, look, see if there's a car. And when you're heading north, the cars are heading north. And it's really good I stopped because I saw this car. And if I had just kept going, I would have gotten hit. They come in, and then there's a lot of speed as they go around that entryway. It is a very dangerous spot. And I think we need to have some sort of signage cautioning pedestrians. The other thing is that sidewalk that continues has a lot of cracking in it. Some of those are substantial. During the summer, there were weeds growing up through that. Now those weeds are gone, so it looks a little better, but it's not in good repair. And we need to do something about that. So, and the other thing, many people have been writing about this. One resident of Edina noted that if we approve following a force majeure, we could expect to see legal challenges regarding this from both residents and from other city partners who will claim that business cycles are now unforeseeable circumstances and therefore seek to void or amend their own agreements. And I think this is really setting a precedent that makes me nervous. I don't know if our attorney could comment, Mr. Kendall, on this.
Mr. Chair, member, or Commissioner Risser, I guess I should start by saying that these documents and the proposed amendments were drafted by Dorsey. So, but I can just summarize for you my understanding of the developer's request, because that is outlined in the letter that they sent to the city, and they cite to the force majeure definition stating other events beyond developer's reasonable control which developer could not reasonably foresee would occur, and which developer would have been reasonably expected to take measures to avoid or minimize. That was the provision to which they cited in their letter, and that was the provision upon which Dorsey drafted the proposed amendments. So I guess it's up to the commission to decide if you think that standard warrants granting the extension.
Yeah, to segue off of that then, Mr. Newendorf, in your conversations with Dorsey, under this force majeure provision or unusual circumstances provision, they were comfortable with the notion that this was a situation where this clause would come into play and be appropriate to use as a basis for an extension?
Yes, they were. In my opinion, this current financial situation is not just a cycle. I mean, while the economics are cyclical, we're at a trough that was not expected. Our representatives at Dorsey agreed. Our representatives at Ellers also agreed. We conferred before we drafted any of this. So it's not just, we still have the force majeure in there for a reason. To respond to Commissioner Risser's comment, we don't want to just change a deal because of a typical cycle, but when it's this unusual and this long and this extreme, that's beyond a normal cycle, and we're comfortable with that.
So for me, also, weighing on this is the notion of who are we dealing with here? You know, what's the developer's reputation? And I think Carlson Companies, Mr. Carlson and his organization as developers have always done what they said they were going to do when they said they would do it. So you think of a smaller project like Interlaken and Vernon, the Lorient at Sunnyside in France, and there are others all over our community where things were done when they were promised to be done. And to me, this, just from being involved in the type of work I do, other than at the city hall, I know these circumstances exist out there in the marketplace right now. In our town alone, we've got 400 million plus worth of projects that are approved and stalled out because of liquidity in capital markets. And I think that's going to change probably hopefully by fall of next year. But we don't know for sure. But it is, I think, I agree with you that it's not a cycle. It's an unusual circumstance that we're facing here. And to think that we should hold their feet to the fire under the existing agreement and not be a good partner for the benefit of our residents, frankly, at 70th in France, at 7250 if that comes about, and 7,000, and then we've even got a development issue going on at Macy's. They're all in the same situation. Even companies as strong as Mortensen, one of the foremost contractors and developers in the country, are facing these same liquidity problems. They're here this morning with us. So I think it's in the best interest of the residents of Edina to stand by the agreement that we struck and stretch things out a little bit further to make sure that these projects that we've approved and carefully vetted get built. And we got a chance to get them built here if we do this the right way and we're responsive to these capital market situations. So, Commissioner Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in my line of questioning, I heard two things. I heard a lot, but there are two things that I noted. One, I think what you're saying is if we default, the consequences for the community are worse than where we are today. And so if we default and it takes a year, that site could be there not only for another year and a half to 2 years, but even longer by the time that process goes through, and then we find another project and we start that process all over again. And so I interpreted what you're saying in that way. And so with that, my ask is, again, as a city, let's see what we can do in that interim to make sure the site is secure, if there are things that can be done to make sure it's more aesthetically pleasing or what have you. I think we should partner to make sure we can make those changes as well. And then for Mr. Carlson, I really like that you said, and I'm not going to hold you to this, but the way you phrased, you said you think we have a project that honors the Southdale, brings the guidelines to life. And then when you finished that sentence, you said, but we just need a little bit more time to make that happen. And so those two statements to me give me make me a little bit more comfortable with the position that we're in. And then the third thing is just a personal thing for me. If I voted for something and committed to it, I do feel like I need to see it through. And so that's kind of where I am today on the issue. So thank you.
Commissioner Pierce caused me to think about one other thing I wanted to mention with respect. It doesn't have anything to do with 7001. That site's clean, as we mentioned, looks good. But down at 7250, remember the building was there for quite a while, and then people were breaking windows, and it was. And then when we asked Mr. Carlson to take it down, he took it down. And so he's been responsive to what we've been requesting from a city standpoint too. I was in Woodbury on Monday for a dedication of a bridge. As chair of the tab, and I drove by several big boxes that were just sitting there empty in Woodbury. A lot of things thriving out there, but all of a sudden there's an empty big box, and then another empty big box. So every city's having these challenges around how to keep momentum on development or redevelopment, depending upon what kind of a city you're in. And it stretches way beyond Minnesota in my experience from listening to mayors from around the country. It's a really difficult situation here. So I think we should be responsive to it and be a good partner. And our citizens will be better off for it too, because we've approve these projects, and let's stand by our word, as Commissioner Pierce says. All right.
Thank you.
So the motion you're requesting, Manager Newendorf, is that we approve the First Amendment to the June 30, 2022 TIF redevelopment agreements for 7001 France Avenue, Sites A and Sites B/C with MDI France Avenue LLC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adopt the motion to approve the First Amendment to the June 30, 2022 TIF redevelopment agreements for 7001 France Avenue, Sites A and Site B/C with MDI France Avenue LLC. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. The motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Newendorf. Executive Director comments, anything for us as well?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to let you know that the HRA budget for 2024 will be presented to the council for approval on will be presented to the commission for approval on December 5th. Our plan is to have a brief HRA meeting at the conclusion of the city council meeting. And as you know, there's really no material change in that budget for 24 compared to the current year. Thank you.
HRA Commissioner comments. Anybody have anything for the good of the record? Okay, very good. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know this isn't a city council meeting, but I do want to send a word out of support and condolences to the family of Christian Lundegaard. This is I personally am very sad and upset, and I just want to acknowledge that we want our community to be a safe community, and I'm just devastated by his death. And then on another note, I think it's really important when people write in and say, we want to change developments, we want this to go away. We are partners in this, and when we are consistent and supportive partners, developers come forward with beautiful and modern buildings. And if we are inconsistent partners and unreliable, we're not going to get the investment that we've had in the past. And these developments are beautiful, they're cutting edge, and if we don't want beautiful cutting-edge buildings, we can be inconsistent and variable. But I think it's really important that we be good partners, as well as the people that we're doing business with. We get, responsible and responsive developers coming in here who are answerable to the community. The alternative is not more answerable and more community-minded. It is less community-minded and more risk-taking. And so we want to be a reliable and low-risk partner for people to come to our city and build beautiful things. So I just want to make that comment.
Thank you. With regard to Christian Lundegaard, I think I copied in, did send a note of condolence to Karen Lundegaard, his sister, at the Star Tribune. I think I copied in Jennifer, Director Benarat, and Manager Neal. I could have that sent to the rest of you as well. They could forward it on. I'm ever mindful of that mass communication issue that we have. So you could forward it on. But I did on behalf of our city, send a note of condolence. Really tragic circumstance. So thanks for making that observation. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce to adjourn the meeting of the HRA of the City of Edina this Thursday, November 30th, 2023. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. HRA stands adjourned.